While the world has witnessed a thriving economic partnership between China and the U.S. for decades,
now, through the common efforts of China and the United States, the gate to friendly contact has finally been opened.
behind the scenes, it is a complex relationship where each country sees the other as a potential adversary. In 2013, President Xi Jinping is intent on re-establishing China's dominance in the Pacific and is dismissive of American complaints of cyber espionage. So the U.S. fires a warning shot.
Wanted by the FBI, 5 Chinese military officials who've allegedly spent years stealing trade secrets from some of the biggest companies in the U.S.
For the first time, we are exposing the faces and names behind the keyboards in Shanghai used to steal from American businesses.
Recognizing that U.S. leadership was built on economic strength, the Chinese Communist Party attempts to follow suit. They launch an ambitious roadmap to rapidly transform their manufacturing base into a high-tech global powerhouse by the year 2025. Made in China 2025 targets 10 industries essential to cutting-edge manufacturing supply chains. They issue a series of 5-year plans outlining their goals. However, their tactics do not mirror free economic development. Forced technology transfers, acquisitions of foreign companies, intellectual property theft, and industrial espionage are widespread.
New tonight, stolen secrets stretching from Charlotte to China. Prosecutors say this man worked with the Chinese government, stole millions of dollars worth of technology from a local company, and brought it back to his homeland.
Experts believe the Chinese Communist Party's goal is to control entire supply chains and manipulate global and domestic market conditions. More worrisome is the state-sponsored funding of China 2025 by the Communist Party, which fuses their commercial production with industrial research and military objectives, posing an even greater threat to U.S. national security.
We've now reached the point where the FBI is opening a new China-related counterintelligence case about every 10 hours. China is engaged in a whole-of-state effort to become the world's only superpower by any means necessary.
Those long-held suspicions of adversarial intentions are now on.
I am WAQAS ABDULLAH and you're watching my show. World Economic Order, Present and Future. The global economic landscape has undergone profound changes since the end of the Cold War. After the global financial crisis, the world economy entered a new normal, and there are mounting challenges that need to be managed. Unfortunately, the global governance system has not kept pace with the scale and complexity of these challenges. The post-war agriculture of the world economy was too large, extended by the United States, with the hope of the reconstructing a liberal international economic system. The International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade laid the foundation for the post-war global economic order. The international trade and the capital flows gradually start to resume the solidity, its supremacy in the shadow of the Cold War. Today, the topic of our discussion is the world economical arena. Waqar, thank you very much and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Vikas, for having me here.
And we have another guest, Chris from Germany. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, thank you very much for your invitation to your show.
Thank you. So I would like to start with you, Waqar. As we know that the China is known as the world economic progress. Their economy has increased day by the day, and some economists and some states they said that the China is going to make economic hegemony soon. So what do you think about the China economy is slowly edged toward the world dominance?
Well, for sure. Like if we will talk about the Chinese economy from the global perspective, and we are going to focus on the stats which we have got right now. So we really have to focus on the way they have progressed, especially in the past 2 decades. And even now, we know that China is considered to be the place from where this COVID thing started. And they were the first person, or they were the first country to face that thing up. But the way they have overcome that thing and the way they are progressing now, even after the pandemic, it's quite remarkable. Like recently, the IMF has issued a report where they have actually put up some numbers related to the world's economic growth, which is supposed to be somewhere around 2.7% by the end of this year, and then it's going to be further declining for somewhere around, it could be 2.3 or 1.7 by the end of the next year. But at the same time, if you're going to compare the Chinese economic growth in the year 2022 only, they've already touched the 3.3%. So that is something really remarkable. And this is actually showing the way the Chinese are progressing. So there's no doubt about it that they are the ones people are actually looking up to.
So Chris, how can you highlight this thing that the China's economy is slowly edge toward the world dominance? As you know that you are from Germany as the different aspect as well. We can see that you think that the China is going to be slowly to make the Asia in a hegemonic center. You think that?
Yes, definitely. I also see it the same way. And there is a complete dependence of both Europe and the United States on China, because China is producing almost everything. China is also buying and consuming a lot of goods. China is controlling a lot of natural resources in Africa, especially, and in other less developed countries. China is, on the one hand, a role model. I mean, they did a good job in bringing millions of people from below the poverty line to, let's say, middle class status. This is indeed true, but the Chinese economy still has a lot to do in terms of distributing wealth, in terms of ensuring adequate working conditions for the Chinese, for ensuring a proper life for its own citizens, in distributing the income in a fair way. So on the one hand, yes, we can look up to the Chinese system, and indeed the Chinese were very disciplined and they reached their targets in terms of building infrastructure, improving the standard of living of many people, setting up new technologies, acquiring knowledge. This is indeed true, but they still have to do a better job in focusing on human life and on the value of human life. It's not only about, numbers and exploiting people. Waqar mentioned stats. This is a very good word. The world economy today, and China especially, are very much focused on statistics, indeed. And they're doing a good job at this. But the purpose of the economy is, at the end, serving people, not ensuring nice looking numbers. And the Chinese, just like the rest of the world, but the Chinese, and by this I don't mean the regular people, I mean the Chinese government and the policymakers, they're still lagging behind, and they should focus on improving human life. Okay. First of all, in China, and by doing this, if we do this in each country, we will improve the living conditions and human life for all people in the world. But let's start at least in our own countries.
Okay, as we know that the China's economic system is more powerful than the other states. If we read from the past decades, if we read the statistics about the economic growing system, which is totally one-sided about the China. If we consider, and my question is to you, that if we compare the China's financial system and American financial system, which is more powerful? As we can see, they are being started the tariff war between both of them. So what do you think that the more powerful, and who's going to win? Our discussion is come to an end. Indeed, every bit of change in the global economic order entails the redistribution of international responsibility, as well as international power. Emerging powers, including China, should encourage a perspective that tolerates the development across the world. Cultivation of such a core value will help emerging power undertake international responsibility proportional to their current nation strength and historical suffering from the colonialism. I got to learn a lot about programming with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. See you.
How many Americans are being settled as traders, suppliers, and retailers, and then do the same thing on the US soil and see how many Chinese are being settled there as suppliers, traders, distributors, whatsoever. So you are going to get a completely different picture. So here you have to give credit to the Chinese, the way they have actually converted one of their biggest weakness to one of their biggest strength. Like we know that China has got the largest population in the world. So if we will go back a little bit to the history and we see that China in the year 1960 till 1980, so that was the biggest weakness for them. But the way they have turned it around, that the Chinese government at that time actually had a better vision, I must say, that they started to support their citizens who were planning to go abroad. Government supported them in order to get settled in some other country, in order to create it that slowly and gradually, the way they have increased that supply chain from China to US, from US to Europe, from Europe to the Far East, and that's how. And that is the reason why, if you see the foundations, if you see the establishments of China around the world, they are everywhere. And that is the reason why, if you talk about the ground realities, I do not see US competing China in that. And that is the biggest difference. That is the reason why, even if you're just going to talk about the numbers and you still say that, okay, US has got a little edge even right now, if you see the total size of the GDP. But if you are the student of economics, if you're somebody who know a little bit of economics, then we all know that GDP is just a number which is showing you current status. But if you see the economic growth rate, China is really pushing it hard. And that is the reason why US has got no clue. They have actually got nothing specific, like how are they going to compete with them. So whatever is coming out from US as part of their policy, you can call it a trade war or putting up the tariffs and all. I would just say these are just the short-term gimmicks, nothing very specific. Like they don't have any long-term thing, and I do not see, at least, like how are they going to compete with all these short-term stuff, because you have got the Chinese settled within your soil. You've got the Chinese wherever you are there. So how are you going to compete with them? I
Okay.
can't see US is going to like take it for long.
Okay, Chris, WAQAS is been shed light on some ground realities about the economic war between the China and America. How can you see this? How these dominance or the economic war, how they affect the normal people or the citizens of their countries, like exporters and importers that who have not a large margin?
To be honest, there are two ways to see this. If we just look at the way of competing, and that there should be a winner and a loser, or let's say at least there should be a winner or somebody having the edge or being the number one. Well, under this perspective, of course, China is picking up a lot of speed, has been picking up and is still with a lot of momentum. The US is, on the other hand, getting somehow old-fashioned, slowing down. I mean, I went to the US and I've not been to China, but I've been to Singapore and other Asian countries. I mean, if you just look at the infrastructure, at what is being built, how much creativity, how much ingenuity, technology is being developed in Asia and put in even into public infrastructure, but also in private infrastructure, in private investments, in public investments, the US cannot compare with that, really. Europe as well. The hotspots in today's world, in terms of everything, bringing people together, building, creating, they're not in the old world. I mean, let's say old world from a European perspective. So they're not in Europe, they're not in the US, let's say the traditional leaders of the world. No, they're somewhere in Asia, somewhere in Asia, in the Middle East, in the Far East. I mean, again, from European perspective, they're somewhere there. These are the hubs today. And indeed, from this competition, I think that the US still has an advantage from, let's say, a cultural perspective in doing business, in being innovative, creative, from the education system, which the Chinese government cannot just compensate with, let's say, more investment, more assets, and so on. Of course, they can long term, but this still takes a lot of time. And I think there are also cultural aspects that have an impact on doing business successfully. It's not just the numbers, it's also the soft factors around it. And I think the Americans are even much better than Europeans, most well equipped, let's say, from their cultural mindset to doing business successfully. But the Chinese can compensate it in the long run.
Waqar, I want to know from you that the dominance and the leadership in the internal economy, exploitation, the public good. Is that true?
I didn't catch you, Vikas. If you can please repeat it.
Yes. What do you think that the dominance or the leadership in the internal economy, which is going to be more exploitation in the public goods?
Well, I think it's more about the objective which the governments have to set. And if I have to pick something as the representative or as the spokesperson or as somebody who's going to advise, I would obviously give leadership the more side, because it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, which country you belong to, but it's all about leadership. Because if you are going to come up to that point of economic leadership, then you have to take the positive side of it. Because if you are going to take that economic lead as a leadership, you are going to develop that thing, you're going to pursue for that thing. And in that case, you are not only going to focus on the numbers, which we call economic growth. Instead, you are going to focus on the bigger picture, which is economic development. And here I would like to pick up the points which Chris has already highlighted. When you talk about the economic development, that's basically when you as a government or you as the regional leader would like to see the positive impacts of the economic growth must be reaching up to the bottom line. So every single classification and every single cluster of the economy should be getting the positive effects of it. And that's how the economy is going to develop. And if any country focusing more on economic development instead of only focused on the numbers, obviously in the long run, that country deserves to be called as the economic leader, because that's going to benefit the country, their citizens, the region, and in the longer ground, obviously the whole world.
Okay, Chris, you are from Germany, so I literally want to know from you if you want to add something in that question, which is shed a light on by Waqar, that you have a pro. Otherwise, I have another question for you: that hegemony, dominance, or the leadership. What do you think that explaining the Germany role in the European Monetary Corporation?
First of all, I would like to add something to what Waqar said. So I definitely agree with him. And it's about the economic development, not only the economic growth. And many people around the world are prone to thinking who's bigger, like big. Now, the US is big in terms of the economy. China is big economy and population. But actually, as of today, the most developed countries are small European countries and let's say some Asian hotspots like Singapore, for instance, where indeed this economic growth is reaching everyone, where you don't have incredible discrepancies, where everyone can afford a decent life, or as much as possible a decent life. Take Scandinavian countries like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, take Switzerland, which are small, yeah, and people don't have them on the radar when they think only about this bigness. So actually it's about the people enjoying economic development, not only this big economic growth and the size of the economy. And what I was saying before about one perspective, competition dominance, and this connects now with this question, competition dominance. We're prone to think only about this competition and this tariff war, for instance. How about we cooperate? We cooperate together, all together, and by putting our common interest first, we all benefit from it, because in this mentality of having a war somehow, an economic war, a military war, as we can see nowadays, in this war, there's always a winner and a loser. But if we cooperate, if we grow up as people, as nations, as countries, and we put our common goods first, then we are all better off. And regarding the European hegemony of Germany, unfortunately, I would have to say that Germany is also becoming rusty, becoming old. And again, losing this upper hand and this technology and ingenuity to Asian countries like China. So there's been an incredible shift in the last 20 years, I would say 20, 30 years, from US, Europe to Asia, and especially to China.
Okay, Waqar, would you like to add something into the European hegemony?
I think Chris has actually sketched a very good picture about it by talking about how the things are working and the way we had seen that shift. And I think there's not much required to be added here. It's good enough for the people to understand, especially those who would like to read between the lines.
Okay, in last, I have a last question to both of you that about the China's. As we know that the China is the world fastest economic growing state. So kindly please inform me to my viewers and the people that who are listening you when the program is going to upload it that China is an economic winner or an economic leader. Waqar.
I would go with the second option. Like if you are going to compare economic winner or the economic leader,
On what
I
ground?
personally I say Chinese as the economic leader because I told you why. Because if you just see the overall perspective, first I have already included like the way they have created that policy and they help their citizens to just spread out in the whole world, and slowly and gradually they found their placement into the roots of the countries at different parts of the world. But now if we'll see the bigger picture, the One Belt, One Road project of China, the way they are linking up the countries, a lot of things, yes, I'm admitting this thing that a lot of countries, they've got some perspective that no, they are overcoming our assets and this and that, but you need to blame their own governments. If you see the bigger picture, Chinese, they're helping themselves. Chinese, they are trying to connect different parts of the world because you see, when the world is going to get connected, from countries to countries, regions to regions, continents to continents, at the end, who is taking the benefit? Every single person, every single consumer, every single individual like us, because we are all going to get benefited. Because if you see from the Chinese perspective or any individual supplier, producer, or seller's perspective, you need the people, you need the buyer. And Chinese, they are actually sketching a real big and a new picture of the world. That's why I consider them as the economic leader of the future. Not now. They're progressing towards that.
Okay, now Chris, it's your turn. What do you think? If the China is
Finally, I
economic
can
leader?
disagree. Finally, I can disagree with Waqar because we've been agreeing so far. This might get boring, but not out of this reason. I would not see them as a leader because for me, a leader should be like a role model or someone that I would like to follow or that inspires me. I mean, they have been doing a good job as we discussed already, but I think that China, from the economic policy, from the human rights policy, environmental policy, and everything that related to policy is not at all a role model to follow. Unfortunately, there is not a role model in this world, in any place of the world, neither in the US, nor in Europe, nor in Asia. There's nowhere a role model, a real role model, because a role model should be a place where human life is the highest value, where all our economic activities and everything that we do are aimed at improving human life, improving the environment, improving health of people, all those things. I mean, and the Chinese government is sacrificing a lot on this way. And I mean, China is somehow very similar to the US. I mean, they're very much focused on hard capitalism. I mean, they are a hybrid between a market economy and a planned economy. But they're in such a way, this hybrid, that there's a lot of power in the hands of the few, the political elite and the economic elite of China. It's not in the hand of the Chinese as such, by far not. And I would, out of this reason, I would call them a winner as of today, but I would not give them the gold medal of the leader. And no one gets, from my perspective, a gold medal.
Okay. Well, you would like to add something?
No, it's okay. I totally respect the point of view what Chris has raised.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why, see, I took a little bit of defensive at the end when I was just completing my perspective. I am going to mention that thing again. The economic leader of the future, that's how I see them in the longer perspective, but not now. What I'm saying, they're progressing towards that. And this was the reason I did not give them the title right now, because I knew what's coming. And Chris was bingo.
Thank you so much to both of you. Now the time of the program is coming to an end. Thank you so much for Waqar for joining us and share your knowledge with me and my audience as well.
Thank you very much, WAQAS, for
And
having me here. It's been a
thank-
wonderful time.
Thank you so much. And thank you,
Thank
Chris, for also for joining us to share our knowledge and share the light on some essential factors about the economic dominance of the world. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure to connect with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Our discussion is come to an end. Indeed, every bit of change in the global economic order entails the redistribution of international responsibility as well as international power. Emerging powers, including China, should encourage a perspective that tolerates the development across the world. Cultivation of such a core value will help emerging power undertake international responsibility proportionate to their current nation strength and historical suffering from the colonialism. I got to learn a lot about programming with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next program. Allah Hafiz.